I now welcome Lillian Howan. She's the author of The Charm Buyers. She's a wonderful coordinator, and she's the author of the book, like I said, The Charm Buyers, published by the University of Hawaii Press, recipient of the Kapalopalo Kokokela Award for Excellence. I hope.
Thank you so much, Roz. And thank you so much to the Redwood City Public Library and the Friends of the Redwood City Public Library. We are very thankful to the library for sponsoring this event. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone people. And I'd like to thank each one of you in the audience for joining us for this event. We're here to honor Tom Farber and to celebrate the publication of his book, Acting My Age. Here with us is the managing editor of Manoa, publisher of Acting My Age, along with University of Hawaii Press, as well as a former student of Tom, now an award-winning author. And it's my very great pleasure to introduce them both, after which we will be in conversation with Tom Farber. Pat Matsueda is the managing editor of Manoa, a Pacific Journal of International Writing, and the author of Bedeviled, a novella, as well as the poetry collection Stray and Bitter Angels. She's also the founder of the Misaligned Anthology series and the University of Hawaii e-zine Vice Versa. She is a recipient of the Elliott Cades Award for Literature. Shawna Yang Ryan is a former Fulbright scholar and the author of the novels Water Ghosts, formerly Locke 1928, and Green Island. She is a professor at the University of Hawaii Manoa Creative Writing Program. Her writing has appeared in Ziziva, the Asian American Literary Review, the Rumpus, Lit Hub, and the Washington Post. Her work has received the Association for Asian American Studies Best Book Award in Creative Writing, the Elliott Cades Emerging Writer Award, and an American Book Award. Welcome both Pat and Shawna. And Shawna, would you like to introduce Tom?
So it's a rare honor to be able to introduce someone who has played such a formative role in one's life. So I'm very pleased to have the chance to say a few words about Tom Farber tonight. I've known Tom for almost 25 years, and I consider him a mentor, a friend, and a writer and teacher whom I deeply admire. So I'd like to start with more of a personal recollection. On and off the page, Thomas Farber is, without hyperbole, brilliant. When I was an undergraduate in the English department at Berkeley, every aspiring young fiction writer wanted to take a workshop with Tom. He had a reputation for being tough and transformative. And students couldn't automatically enroll. They had to submit a manuscript and be accepted. And the list of admitted students was posted in the hall. And I remember clearly the anxiety of marking off the days until the list was posted and the excitement of discovering that my name was on it. The 2 semesters that I spent in Tom's workshop were magical and indeed, as people claimed, transformative. We often began each class reading a poem aloud multiple times until the music was burned into our hearts. I still remember the poems we read, more than 20 years later, such as Wallace Stevens' The Snowman. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost in the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow. Tom had a talent for asking just the right question that would suddenly open up a text. I've taken and I have taught many creative writing classes, and I think it's not as common as it should be to be able to learn from the critiques of other people's work as much as from critiques of your own. I left each class so inspired that I would immediately go home and start writing. And best of all, talking about work with Tom made me, as an unpublished 20-year-old, feel like a, quote, real writer. And I feel that same kind of inspiration and learning that I felt in his classes when I read Tom's work, which is precise, incisive, illuminating. Just as he brought the music of poetry to his students, I see how music infuses his lines, which are so lean and every word is so carefully chosen. As one reviewer phrased it, Tom, quote, brings a poet's care to the craft of writing, sculpturing the phonetic beauty of words. Originally from Boston and a graduate of Harvard College, Tom has been a senior lecturer in UC Berkeley's English department since 1995. He's highly decorated, a former Fulbright Scholar, Guggenheim Fellow, and 3-time National Endowment for the Arts recipient of the Dorothea Lange Paul Taylor Prize, and a Rockefeller Foundation Scholar at Bellagio. He's also a former surfer who has traveled and written extensively in and about the South Pacific. He splits his time between California and Hawaii. For a writer, Thomas Farber's work is a masterclass. For a reader, it's thought-provoking, a wide-ranging delight across 28 books that range from fiction to essays to epigrams, encompassing dry wit and profound revelation. Thomas Farber's work reveals a deeply curious and erudite mind. His current book, Acting My Age, which we are celebrating tonight, is described as unflinching, luminous, cleverly conceived. Please join me in welcoming Thomas Farber.
Thank you, Shawna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shawna, and welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Lillian. Thank you, Shawna. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Ross.
I'd like to start with the beginning of Acting My Age, which begins literally at the water's edge. The trade winds, the ocean, you call it H2O at the beginning, tracks of ghost crabs in the sand, and calm. You write, "This small beach is my office and church." Tell us a bit about your office and church.
Well, in my time in Hawaii, there's a small beach that I try to start my day with. And as a surfer, I'd go there really just at first light, well before dawn. And amazingly, in a city of 1 million people in Honolulu, there'd be no one out there at the surf break. I could be alone out there when I paddled out and maybe be alone there for an hour. So that it wasn't that I disliked people, but I wanted to be free of the human for a while. And there I'd be in the lineup waiting for another set. And I'd be gently rising and falling on the swell. And I'd be looking at Diamond Head right ahead of me. And my first book about water, the book called On Water, developed when I was in that mode of waiting for the next set. And then I began to wonder whether it wasn't that Diamond Head itself was rising and falling, and I was the stationary object. Anyway, so that's my favorite spot. And then when I'm not surfing or swimming, when I go down to first light, it's just me and the ghost crabs. And I try to make peace with them since growing up in New England, I ate a lot of lobster. So I have some debts to pay, but I pay attention to them. And Franz Kafka said that you don't have to do something. You don't have to achieve something. Sometimes you just have to be still and let the world come to you. And it can be ecstatic without trying to be ecstatic. And so that's my small beach. And people often see me there at different times of the day. And the unspoken question is, why are you here so much? And so eventually I had to answer that question, I felt. And so even though I don't like hyperbole very much, I would say to them that it's my office and my church. And no one ever balked at my calling it a church. Perhaps they too, I wrote, have experienced Derek Walcott's Amen of calm waters. Still, was I talking about worship or reverence? Maybe, but at the very least, the ocean was for me a source of great pleasure. So finally, back then, I let myself go with the rhetorical currents and said, the beach is my church. This also spoke to something Philip Larkin, the poet, wrote He said that if he was called in to construct a religion, I should make use of water. And for sure, this particular beach is where Larkin's any angled light can congregate endlessly, though no man-made house of adoration can hold a votive candle to the ocean. Church? No, not even a cathedral. Ocean too vast and alive to be compared to the man-made. A category error, but one reaches for analogies, metaphors and similes, argumentative, playful, a stretch, but how we humans crave them and how we writers create them.
Thank you so much, Tom. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the writing, the creating of the book of Acting My Age, and perhaps we have introduced Pat, who's the managing editor of Manoa, and also maybe you might introduce Kit here and speak.
Well, Kit is there on screen as my guest because she was the former managing editor of El Leon Literary Arts and, among other things, the extraordinary editor for Shawna Ryan's first novel, initially titled Locke 1928. So there's Kit and her husband, Dick, two wonderful people.
Welcome, Kit and Dick.
So, Pat, are you going to say something or shall I just plow ahead?
Please plow ahead.
Oh, so what was the question?
About the writing and the writing of Acting My Age.
Yeah.
Something about it and its place in your life. And Pat, feel free to jump in.
Well, back at the end of 2014, I was approaching open heart surgery and I was walking more and more slowly. And one day, just before that surgery was to happen, I was walking and a homeless person, a crazy person came toward me and he was shouting, "Do you want to die right now?" Which I thought was very interesting because I was perhaps in the process of dying right then. As it turns out, I didn't die. He didn't kill me and the surgery didn't kill me. And soon after, I published a book which included that anecdote. And that book, which came out in early 2015, was called Here and Gone. Well, what does a writer do after he finishes a book? Sometimes a writer starts another one. And so that's where this book began. After open heart surgery, recovering from it, seeing a book come out, I'm just habituated to trying to write books, I guess. So this book then was written from early 2015 until the very early months of 2020. And at the end of 2019, that is 5 years after my previous open heart surgery, I had another. And it was the same marvelous surgeon. And I told him I didn't think we could go on meeting like that. But we survived. We both survived that episode. And a few months after that second open heart surgery, 5 years later, I completed Acting My Age. And then I sent it to Frank Stewart and to Pat Matsueda, the editor and managing editor of Manoa Journal, to see what they thought. So I think that's a part of a story.
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything to that, Pat?
Well, let me start that sentence again. Tom asked me to help edit his books. And of course, I was very intimidated by the thought of editing him. But so I began rather meekly. But I think as we worked together, he trusted me and I began to trust myself. So I think we developed a good relationship. So last year he asked me if I wanted to work on Acting My Age, and I said sure. And I read it and I said to Frank, we should consider publishing this as a volume of Manoa. And he read it and he said, yes, we should. And well, the rest is history. But it's a wonderful book. And I'm very, very proud and happy we published it.
I should say that Manoa Journal, which is the work of Frank Stewart and Pat Matsueda, it's more than 30 years now. They're just a remarkable literary production. And these are two wonderful people of letters, I think you'd have to call them. Anyway, I much admire them, and I'm very fortunate that they took on acting my age, and then in collaboration with the University of Hawaii Press, brought it out.
Thank you. Yes, Kit, would you like to say something? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
Kit.
Yes.
Tom, in that book, in your last book, you enjoyed once again words and the history of words in almost every story. And I took a lot of pleasure in arriving at that moment, reading that list. I know you've said you and your brothers, maybe it was, used to just love those, making fun with words. And I wondered if you'd want to talk about that.
Well, my brother Steve is a gifted polylingualist, and like my mother. So when we were kids, my brother at one point, for instance, was learning Russian because it was the Sputnik era. And he was able, in any of these languages, to kind of step into the persona of the national type. And so in speeches by Khrushchev to the Presidium, there'd be this note in the text, "Urli applaudismente," which meant stormy applause. So that, for instance, when my brother and I as kids were throwing a football, and one of us made a good catch, we'd shout, "Urli applaudismente." So that's part of my my cultural tradition, is polylingual bantering with my brother. And, but also in a family like ours, you pretty much had to get into words in order to be able to play, but also to survive. Yeah, words were important.
Thank you. And thank you for that question, Kit.
Yeah.
The photography in Acting My Age is phenomenal. It's beautiful. And Ross, could we bring up on the screen the photograph, the circling Akule photograph? This is a photograph by Wayne Levin that, here we go.
Oh yeah.
I hope that we're able to see. It's one of many astounding photographs in the book. Tom, can you speak a little bit about your collaborative work with both Wayne Levin and Jeffrey Fricker?
Sure. Yeah, with pleasure. So back in the late 1980s, I was looking at Diamond Head rising and falling when I was out there at the surf break, and beginning to think of how I'd write about the ocean. And my a former editor of mine said, "Oh, you'll do a book about water and then a book about fire." And I said, no, just a book about water. Well, in that period, in the late 80s, I happened to see a photograph, a black and white in the water photograph by Wayne Levin. And at that time, such photographs were rare. Most water photographs were in color. They were often dazzling, but not black and white. And of course, the restraint of this medium, interested me. So I set out to meet the photographer and did. And I looked through his portfolio. I met Wayne and his wife, Mary, also a photographer. And looking at his work, I said, you and I should collaborate. And this was, I didn't know what I had in mind, but I knew I was trying to do something in words of the quality of what he was doing in photography. And so, sure enough, we started spending water time together and traveling together to famous dive sites. And out of that has come 3 books of Wayne's photographs and my text. And it's been a great collaboration and a great friendship. And I'm blessed, to have pursued my curiosity and had such good fortune. As for the other photographer whose work is in Acting My Age, years ago, in the 90s, I collaborated with Jeffrey Fricker on a project with many other people about the upper Sacramento River here in California. And that work by Jeffrey Fricker, his photographs, eventually emerged as a beautiful book called Sacrament, just dazzling. But meanwhile, back in the 90s, Jeff was obsessed with a ruined sugar mill in Hawaii on the island of Maui. And it was a mill that was had been overtaken, consumed by banyan trees. And that Hamakua Boko mill outside of Paia. And so in the
I'm
late...
just going to ask Ross to bring that up to the screen.
Oh, good.
We have that photo.
Yeah, so there's the...
Please go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so there's the Hamakua Boko mill. It was once an industrial factory in the 19th century, smokestack, and enormous numbers of immigrant laborers and bosses and smoke, and all kinds of labor. But now it's a ruin, and the banyan trees have grown over. So Jeffrey Fricker became obsessed with this place, photographing it. And in the late 90s, he asked me to go over to Paia and see if I could find the words to describe it. And so I did. And so that essay and some of Jeff's photographs are also in this book, Acting My Age. I've had great fortune in these 2 friends, these 2 artists, yeah.
Shawna had spoken about Wallace Stevens, the poetry of Wallace Stevens, and in your book, Acting My Age, you quote, you talk about some lines from Wallace Stevens: each person completely touches us with what he is and as he is in the stale grandeur of annihilation. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, Wallace Stevens, so Shawna's quite right. We read a couple of Wallace Stevens poems in those seminars so many years ago. The House Was Quiet and the Room Was Still is one of my favorites, The Snowman. But otherwise, unlike some people, I'm not deeply drawn to Wallace Stevens. But while I was writing Acting My Age, occasionally I would go out to my garage, which is my library, and I would look for a book that would lead me forward, something to provoke me. And after my mother died nearly 40 years ago, my poet mother, I took some of her books, and one of them was a collected Wallace Stevens. Not something I had worked my way through, but I started leafing the pages. And finally, on what was it, page 504, I got to a poem with a long German title, Lebensweisheit Spielerei. Well, that just irritated me because I didn't know what that meant, and I knew I was going to have to look it up, and I sort of had a grievance against Wallace Stevens for that title. But then I read the poem, and in its 15 lines and 85 words and 5 verses, the proud and the strong are long gone, leaving the unaccomplished, the finally human. That is the rest of us, as he seemed to be saying. And he writes, in the poverty of autumnal space, he argued, there was ever less to say, nothing to pretend, to lay claim to, which led him to that conclusion. Each person completely touches us with what he is and as he is in the stale grandeur of annihilation. Well, the first time I read that, I thought, what a bunch of baloney. Like, we don't know what someone else is and as they are. And we don't know, stale grandeur, annihilation, blah, blah, blah. Well, I slowed down and I kept reading the poem. And then finally, I made that refrain my own. Each person completely touches us with what he is and as he is in the stale grandeur of annihilation. Now, sometimes, I'm at a certain age. How old am I? I must be 77. Sometimes with a friend who's my age or older, and some of my friends are declining fast, we're together, we're talking, and neither of us is trying to achieve anything in the conversation. That is, we just are. And in that moment, each person completely touches us with as he is and what he is. And because some of them are in great jeopardy, I guess you could say it's in the stale grandeur of annihilation. Well, Stevens's title, Lebensweisheit Spielerei, I'm not a native German speaker, it is a compound word at the root of which is the idea of adages or axioms one learns through long experience or close attention. And maybe Stevens was also teasing us by saying he was coming up with another adage, which is that refrain at the end of the poem. Anyway, that's about that poem. Yeah.
Thank you. On a similar type of note, you're talking about the trifecta, that you're taking, here's a quote, "I was taking the measure of my health, of aging in general, and of what I, perhaps understating, termed the death of the ocean." Can you speak a little bit about that, what you call the trifecta?
Yeah, well, the health was clear. I've been blessed, with extraordinary medical care, but there's been a lot of time spent in hospitals or getting tested and surviving something. So it's a mixed blessing. But then it's my nature to want to inform myself about things. And so I wanted to know more about what other people had said about aging. And a lot of that is revealed in Acting My Age, where I'm quoting person after person who's either aging or responding to his or her own aging and so on. I have shelves and shelves of books that I felt would teach me something. As a writer, I want to learn things. And then the death of the ocean, well, we're a powerful species, and we're more powerful than we are accountable at the moment. So anyone who's around the ocean, not to mention any other part of the larger world, knows that the things that we talk about going into a state of extinction, in some ways, we might better use the word extermination. Who's doing the exterminating? It isn't that things are opting to go extinct. That isn't quite how it works. So these three things, my own health, aging, and the people aging around me, the literature of aging, and then what I called, perhaps in hyperbole, the death of the ocean, but the ocean's, much changed. Well, and then finally, so that was a trifecta, I joked. But then, as I was writing this book, it became a quadrifecta. What else could possibly happen? Well, it was the presidency of Donald Trump. And of course, that was another grave cause for grave concern. So that was my state of mind in writing this book. And readers will see that there's one piece in the book in which I try to imagine the former president in his older age. Yeah, it seems to be unavoidable. Yeah.
Are you able to read, maybe from whatever section you would like to read, a little bit about this trifecta or quadrifecta?
Well, I don't think I'll read about the former president right now, but suffice to say that that chapter, the title of which is Entrails. You know what entrails are? They're not contrails. They're not folk tales. They're entrails. Yeah, Entrails. What else? What else have you got to ask me, Lillian?
I will say that in preparation, I read the book twice and I never failed to be amused by that section.
Yeah, the book is actually not all bleak. There's a lot of banter in it and wordplay and teasing. For instance, Larry Kudlow, you may remember from the former president's administration, was his economic advisor. And he's a person who had had health problems, and he is a person who had had drug problems. And he was in his 70s. And offering an opinion about something, he said, well, I don't think this particular problem will come to pass in my lifetime. And I heard this, and I thought, what does he imagine his lifespan is, you know, given his age and his history? So, you know, part of writing this book was responding to stuff that amused me, and even if it was a little grim. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I should say that my mom, she was never mom, she was mother. Mother published 35 books, was a famous singer and actress, and demanding too. But my mother runs through the book as well. And one thing she wrote in a book that was grieving the loss of her husband, my father, a beautiful book called Year of Reversible Loss. She has this line: 20,000 waves of days have come over me, still not enough for drowning. 20,000 waves of days have come over me, still not enough for drowning. And because I'm a writer, I think, and I've now lived longer than my mother lived, I think maybe I'll do a book, the title of which will be 30,000 Waves of Days. 30,000 Waves of Days. My mother also had a sharp wit. And when I was young, there was an idiom, people were reluctant to apologize. So my mother had this line in one of her books. Apology will be my death, the poet said beneath her breath, unless doth death one day prove to be my only true apology. Apology will be my death, the poet said beneath her breath, unless death one day prove to be my only true apology. I learned a lot from that writer, my mother. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about your mother and your father? You've alluded to your family as kind of the springboard for you developing in words and as a writer.
Well, they were married forever. They met when my mother was 17 and my father 24, I think. And they married soon after. And they were extraordinary people. My father was a very great physician and a pioneer in the chemotherapy of cancer, and built a hospital, the first in the world for the care of children with cancer and so on. And they sustained each other, I would say, quite remarkably. And my mother not only raised 4 children and sustained my father in his great ambitions, but also was able to, produce her many books of poetry and books for children, and her singing and her acting, quite an amazing person. So yeah, but they were tough. They were tough parents. They weren't tough. They did the best they could. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pat, I saw that we had a bit of a visitor there, a feline visitor. And I was wondering also if Shawna has opened up with an anecdote about Tom, and I was wondering if you had a favorite anecdote to share.
Well, there are several. We were talking about my boss, Frank Stewart, and good friend of Tom's. and I was remarking on Frank's fashion sense. And I said that Frank always wore long pants and long sleeve shirts.
This
And
is
I
in
said,
Hawaii, mind you.
yes, in Hawaii, no matter what the season. And I said, you know, I've never seen Frank's knees. And Tom said his knees. I haven't seen his elbows. So anyway, that was a fun, that's a good example of Tom's sense of humor. But actually, I'd like to tell kind of a little sad story, but I think it says something about publishing. You know, once you get bitten by the publishing bug, you can't be rid of it. And it does something to your makeup. It changes you. You are forever after a publisher. As I said to someone in our office, you know, once you learn how to make a book, you're just different. So about 20 years ago, a good friend of ours, a brilliant, beautiful part Hawaiian woman named Darlene Mayalani Dudois, was killed. She was murdered.
Yes.
And Mayalani was a really good writer. She was also a world traveler. She was a poet. She got awards in poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. USA Today at that time had this kind of program called the All-Star Academic Teams. So they invited teachers across the country to nominate students, and Mayalani was nominated and accepted onto one of these all-star academic teams. She was working on her PhD when she died. And anyway, she was just such an extraordinary individual and such a good writer. Tom wanted to publish a volume of her essays.
Yeah.
So he and Frank worked on that. And I'll let Tom tell the rest of this story.
Well, when a writer dies intestate, that is, without having directed where her literary estate goes, then it goes to the nearest next of kin who survived her. And in that case, though I tried very hard, the next of kin wouldn't allow me to publish Mahilani's book. It had something to do with family secrets, but I made the case that this was an artist whose work should be published. It was a great disappointment. She was an extraordinary woman, and I had a project in mind, another project in mind for her. I wanted to retell a famous true story of Hawaiian history, a book by a native Hawaiian woman, and who is the wife of a character in Jack London's fiction called Ko'olau the Leper. Anyway, it would have been a great story to retell about social justice in the year 1893, which was the year of the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. Anyway, it's just publishing books is quite something. Pat has made so many writers' books come to life, but sometimes you don't get to do the book you would have wanted. Lillian, I would like to talk a little bit about deliverance,
Yes.
if we can.
Yes.
Is that okay with you?
The section in your book, there is the quote, "Will creatures here below help this old heaven, old earth, and old sea to abide?" And you talk a bit about Payne's dream and Wilner's vision. So please share us your thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, Roger Payne, back in the mid-90s, he was a pioneer in recording the songs of whales. Nobody had known about that, and he made them alive. So in the mid-90s, he wrote a book called Among Whales, and he argued that the whales had come a long way from Moby Dick, that now they meant something to us in a different way, and they had the power to change us, to make humans more human. That was his great argument, that whales can help humanity save itself, help us make the transition from save the whales to saved by whales. Wouldn't that be something? Humans saved by what humans had so avidly destroyed. Well, it hasn't gone that way, really. Now the ocean's ever more human modified and teeming with the human-made shipping, factory fishing, undersea pipelines, undersea cables, military operations. Ship strikes. Ship strikes is a euphemism for entrapment in fishing gear. Anyway, Roger Payne had this dream that humans could be saved by whales. On the other hand, the poet Eleanor Wilner had a quite different vision. In her poem, Reading the Bible Backwards, the polar caps are melting and a flood undoes every last bit of human history. As she writes, swallowing the old landmarks, swelling the seas that pull the flowers and the great steel cities down. Thus, the day the whales had prayed for until their will accomplished, once again, she writes, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit moved upon the face of the waters. Wow. Well, so much for Genesis, the human-centric creation stories. And she writes, when the waves closed over, completing the green sweep of ocean, how soundlessly it all went under. Well, what to make of this? There's Roger Payne's dream of whales saving us and Wilner's retributive vision. I'm left mulling Robert Frost's poem, Once by the Pacific, where the storm waves are thinking of doing something to the shore that water never did to land before. And in this nighter age of dark intent, his poem concludes, there would be more than ocean water broken before God's last put out the light was spoken. Well, so what's to become of us and the rest of God's creation? Not to disparage Revelation's vision of God's glory, but will creatures here below help this old heaven and old earth and old sea to abide? Abide, such an interesting word, it means to wait for, to remain, to endure. But to endure maybe in the sense of putting up with something, but it also can be a kind of a negative. I couldn't be around such people, we say. Well, we'll all be tuning in to see what our marvelous and brilliant species can do in the face of these differing visions from Payne and Eleanor Wilner. That's just one thought of many, yeah.
Is abiding possible? What might it mean?
Well, we're finding out even as we speak, right? There's a lot of people of great heart and commitment trying to help us change. And it's funny because what's that line from is it Dickens? It was the best of times and the worst of times. So we're sort of in both modes. There's a lot of amazing people, trying to help us do better. But there's also a lot of other people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm very thankful for this time for us all to gather and to speak about your most marvelous, somber and yet celebratory book. Is there anything else that you would like to read from it and share with us?
Nothing pops to mind. I find the book myself very slow going. That is, really, it's humorous because as I was preparing to do this session today, I read the book again and I put as much as I could into it, kind of hoping it's a Vade mecum. It's come with me and see what I learned as I was thinking about these things. And so I quoted a lot of people, and Frank Stewart said I should have had a bibliography. But I thought the reader will find these writers. But I'm hoping it helps. It's interesting. Just the other day, I saw a friend of mine who's in his mid 80s and is in dire straits, as they say. And I wish I could save him. I guess that's a strong feeling. And I think that runs through the book. There are people I wish I could save, but there are also things about the larger natural world that I hope we can save, so that instead of things going to extinction, that we save them from our own capacity to exterminate them. Yeah. It's, everyone in Hawaii knows about the monk seals on Kaimana Beach a few years ago. The monk seals are endangered, but so they're always called the endangered monk seals, but endangered is not their name. They didn't name themselves, they all have the first name endangered monk seal. No. So a monk seal pulled up on a beach, a popular beach in Hawaii, and gave birth to a pup. And it became a huge attraction. People came, both local people and tourists, to see this. And it was remarkable. There were many volunteers trying to protect the monk seals from us, protect from our curiosity. And one of the things I noticed on my morning walks past that beach is that people would come toward the beach if they didn't know about the monk seals, and they would see something in the sand and there were signs around it, and it was a big lump of something. And so immediately the hand would go to the back pocket and up would come a phone, and the phone would take a picture. And then the person would look down to see what the camera had seen. And then the person might immediately text that image to other people, sharing it, all of which is remarkable. What a species we are that we could create this appendage, this phenomenal appendage. And yet, the virtual is not the same as the real. They're not the same thing. And we're in a time heavily influenced by the virtual, miraculous as it is, genius that we are to be able to create the virtual. So, anyway, and so far as I know, the monk seals collected no revenues from their images being shared by millions of people. So something to think about. Anyway, that's about endangered monk seals. Yeah.
So grateful for this time, Tom. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you. Yeah. Thank you for making this happen, Lillian. And thank you, Roz. And thank you to the Redwood City Public Library. Thank you all.